It is about time the children of Canaan and the children of Shem unite. I want to talk about the curse of Noah and how Israel came to its present location. When I look at the carnage in Gaza, I ask the question, is peace possible between the Palestinians and the Israelis? I never forget October 7, 2023, as I watched it, the Italians saw Hamas entered Israel and took over 1,000 hostages, and there they went. Israel responded swiftly by bombing Gaza. Whether Israel's response was proportionate or not is not for me to say on this podcast. But I can say that my heart is broken to see Gaza destroyed with over 630,000 people, including children, dead. On October 10th, 2025, leaders of Egypt, Turkey, Qatar joined President Trump to discuss how to bring peace between Israel and the Palestinians. Israel agreed to stop bombing Gaza and allowed aid to flow. Israel agreed to release Palestinian prisoners, and Hamas agreed to release the remaining hostages of Israelis, whether dead or alive. The Trump initiative, as far as I'm concerned, is built on sand. It will soon crumble, and I'm about to show you. You see, the issue between Palestine and Israel is about rightful ownership of land. Over 100 years, we have dodged the question about rightful ownership of land. The two-state solution is only possible when the matter of ownership is settled, as far as I'm concerned. Can Palestinians live side by side with Israelis peacefully, is the question. Will Israel hand over land to Palestinians? Maybe no, maybe yes. But we'll all agree that conflict between Palestine and Israel is geographical. It has worldwide implications for every continent. And there are no neutral sides to the conflict. Iran has vowed to wipe out Israel from the face of the earth. In recent times, Israel has shown that it is too powerful for Iran. She's able to penetrate Iran airspace unhindered. The West, led by US, have sworn to defend Israel at all costs. US policy towards Israel and Palestine has never been the same. The US provides weapons for Israel, but provides food for Palestinians against the possible threat by Iran and Yemen to attack Israel. The US and UK have warships in the Middle East ready to defend Israel. Britain has always supported Israel. For example, in 1917, the UK government was involved in the Balfour Declaration to advocate the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people after the end of the First World War. Some say that the Balfour Declaration was the cause of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict because it imposes on Palestine to accept the Israelis as legitimate owners of the land. I beg to differ with those who claim that Israel was only legitimized on May 14, 1948. It is a fact that the outcome from the Israeli-Arab War in 1948 put Israel in control of Jerusalem, and the subsequent waves of migration of Ashkenaz Jews to its present location. However, there is another relevant point that has often been overlooked. It is the biblical relevance of this subject. And I want to say that it is linked to the death of a woman. I'm making a deliberate attempt to tie the history of Israel to the death of this woman. This woman was buried in the cave of Machpelah. Who was this woman, you may ask? She was the wife of Abraham. Her name was Sarah. The Bible says, and Sarah died in Hebron in the land of Canaan, and Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and weep for her. And Abraham rose from before his death and said to the Hittites, I am a sojourner and a foreigner among you. Give me property among you for a burying place, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. Genesis 23, verse 2 to 4. Notice very importantly what Abraham said. Abraham admitted that he was a settler in Canaan. And quote, Abraham rose and bowed to the Hittites, the people of the land, Genesis 23:7. The Bible says that. So here we find that the Hittites were the owners of the land. They were the people of the land as described in the Bible. Abraham requested from Ephron, the leader of the Hittites, a land to bury Sarah. And Abraham bought a land from the Canaanites and buried his wife Sarah in the cave of Machpelah. There have been several attempts to change the historical narrative about the cave of Machpelah. About AD 55, there were a Christian basilica on the site of the cave of Machpelah. Why did the Christians do so? They did so because they wanted to tie Christianity to an identity that they come from the children of Abraham, all of us. Then when the Ottoman Empire took control over Jerusalem in 1188, they built the Ibrahima Mosque in proximity to the cave of Machpelah at Hebron. I believe that the Ottoman Empire's attempt to Islamize Hebron did contribute to some extent hostility between Jews and the Palestinians. Then in 1967, Israel converted half of the Ibrahimi Mosque into a synagogue. This conversion infuriated a Palestinian to trigger a hand grenade, injuring 47 Israelis. In response to that, in 1994, an Israeli settler showing his disdain for the Ibrahim Mosque murdered 29 Palestinian Muslims. It is noted, and I note that prior to AD 55, 1188, and 1948, the patriarch Abraham lived in Hebron or Canaan. It was in Canaan that Abraham had Ishmael and Isaac. It was in Canaan that Sarah died. It was in Canaan that Abraham buried his wife, Sarah, and Abraham himself died in Canaan. He was buried alongside Sarah in the cave of Machpelah, Genesis 25, verse 9. So I say that Isaac had his sons Esau and Jacob in Canaan. Jacob had all his children in Canaan. It was from Canaan that Joseph was sold into slavery by his brethren to Egypt. Jacob and his family at some point migrated into Egypt from Canaan. Israel lived in Canaan, in Egypt, for over 430 years. It was while in Egypt that Jacob died, but his mortal remains were transported to Hebron in Canaan, where he was buried. You see, the Exodus story is about the migration of Israel to the promised land, which is Canaan. It is therefore important to underline that Abraham lived in Canaan. I want to emphasize that Abraham lived in Canaan. He purchased a parcel of land in Canaan to bury his wife. Abraham was a landowner. His descendants, I believe, have a right of ownership because he bought a land from the Canaanites, and as a result of that, he became a landowner. And I submit to you in this podcast, as a landowner, he has a right to bequeath his land to whosoever he will. In the next presentation, I'll be talking about the importance of this purchase of Abraham in the land of Canaan. But I want you to know that it was this woman, the death of Sarah, that actually made Abraham a landowner. Noah is a very important person in this presentation. Once upon a time, God said he would destroy the whole earth with rain. So he asked Noah to build an ark. You know the story. And after Noah had built the ark, he preached almost for 120 years, inviting whosoever will to join him in the ark. The people did not believe Noah because they had never seen rain. Suddenly the rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights, and only 8 persons survived from the flood. They were Noah and his wife, Shem and his wife, Ham and his wife, and Japheth and his wife. I'm going to focus particularly on Ham and Shem. But according to the Bible, the ark settled on Mount Ararat. The location of Mount Ararat will be between somewhere in Turkey. When the rain stopped, the ark now settled. Definitely there will be a migration of the human beings that came out of the ark, that is Noah and his children. So let's trace the migration of sons of Noah, where they settled. The Bible says these are the generations of the sons of Noah: Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Sons were born to them after the flood. Genesis 10 verse 1. I'm particularly focusing on Ham. He had 4 sons, namely Cush, Mizraim, Phut, and Canaan. At some point in Noah's life, we got to understand that he got drunk and exposed his nakedness. When Sam, his second son, saw his father's nakedness, he mocked and went back and told his brothers about his father's plight. Strangely enough, when Noah got out of his drunken stupor, and the Bible says he knew what Ham had done, I believe that he acted irrationally. I don't believe that the curse of Noah was divinely instituted, and I beg to differ on this one. But when he got out of his drunken stupor, he said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant or servants shall you be to your brothers." He also blessed Shem and said, "Let Canaan be his servant." Genesis chapter 9, verse 24 to 26. Here we find Ham had 4 sons, namely Cush, which is Ethiopia, Mizraim, which is Egypt, Canaan, and Phut. So the question is, if Ham was the one who saw his father's nakedness and mocked his father, why did Noah curse Canaan, who was his grandson? It is important to trace where Canaan settled from Turkey after the flood. Dr. Burton, in his book Blessings of Africa, traced Canaan to have settled in the present Palestine, where we currently have the conflict. Canaan's children are Sidon, Heth. The descendants of Canaan are Jebusites, Amorites, Gigahites, Hivites, Archites, Sinites, and Abadites, and the Zemarites, and the Hamorites, all the Hites. Afterwards, the clans of the Canaanites dispersed. So we know that there was a migration from Turkey up when the ark had rested. And so they then dispersed. The generations or the children they had after the flood made a migration. Genesis 10, 16 to 18 tells us that. Ham had 4 sons, namely Cush, Mizraim, Canaan, and Phut. And I stress Cush is Ethiopia, Mizraim is Egypt, Canaan is the Palestinians or Palestine, and the Bible is silent about the descendants of Phut. Some says they migrated to West Africa or South Africa, I don't know. However, with certainty, I know that Canaan is Palestinians. There's evidence that Canaan and his descendants did not settle in Africa, like Mizraim, which is Egypt, Phut, which we don't know where he went, but Cush, which we know certainly to be around Ethiopia, Sudan, and that side of Africa. The Bible describes Canaan's area of jurisdiction to encompass the whole of Jebus, which was later named Jerusalem by King David. It is not in dispute that the territory of the Canaanites extended from Sidon in the direction of Gerar as far as Gaza, and in the direction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, as far as Lasha. We find these descriptions in Genesis chapter 10, verse 19. Now, if Noah cursed Cain to be Shem's servant, it is also important for me to trace the migration of Shem after the flood. We have to do that, so I know where the Shemites, when Shem went after the flood from Turkey. According to Genesis chapter 10, verse 30, Shem's territory extended from Mesha in the direction of Sephar to the hill country of east of Mesha, located at the west boundary of the Red Sea in Arabia. So that ties Shem to Saudi Arabia side. You may beg to differ with this description, but that's what, if you talk about the Red Sea and Arabia, then you are looking at Saudi Arabia side, or Arabia side. And I refer you to read about Shem's descendants from Genesis 11:10 to 32. At some point in this migration, Abraham's parents moved towards the north and settled in the province of Babylon of Ur. Abraham was a Shemite. His father's name was Terah, and Terah had Abraham in Babylon. It was Terah's father, Nahum, whose desire was to settle to move to Canaan, but that desire did not materialize, so he settled in Haran. Genesis 11:31. It was at Ur, that the Lord called Abraham and asked him to move to a land that he will show him. The Bible says, so Abraham went as the Lord has told him, and Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he departed from Haran and took Sarah his wife and Lot his brother's son and their possessions that they had guarded and the people that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out to go to the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abraham passed through the land to the place Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At that time, the Bible says the Canaanites were in the land. Notice what the Bible says. At the time when Abraham came to Canaan, the Canaanites were in the land. The key phrase in the above verse is that at that time the Canaanites were in the land. They were the host nation, so they welcomed Abraham and lived in peace with him and his family. Let me say that it was at Canaan that the Lord assured Abraham that he would give his offspring the land of Canaan. See Genesis 12 verse 7. The land wasn't given to to Abraham, but in Genesis 12:7, the Lord said he would give the land to Abraham's offspring. Note that God did not promise Abraham land. No, Abraham and his family settled at Canaan till Sarah, his wife, died. And the Bible says Sarah died, that is in Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham went to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Abraham requested a land to bury Sarah, and the Canaanites told Abraham that he could bury Sarah in one of their tombs. Abraham rejected the offer to bury Sarah in their tombs. Rather, he decided to buy a piece of land at Hebron from the Hittite king called Ephron, the Canaanite. Here is how the Bible described the transaction. My Lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? Bury your dead, Ephron told him. In other words, Abraham is saying, why would you pay 400 shekels for a land? Just take the land and bury your wife. Abraham listened to Ephron and weighed out for Ephron a silver that he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver, according to the weight current among the merchants. So the field of Ephron in Machpelah, which was to the east of Mamre, the field which the cave that was in it, and all the trees that were in the field throughout its whole area was made over to Abraham as a possession in the presence of the Hittites before all who went in at the gates of the city. So here's what happened. At the gate of the city, when contracts were normally signed, there was an agreement between the Canaanites or the Hittites and Abraham that you paid us 400 shekels of silver. Now the land belongs to you. The above verses satisfy the legal requirements of a contract, namely an offer, acceptance, consideration, and intention to create a legal relationship. Abraham paid for the land. Abraham owned Hebron. By virtue of that purchase, I believe that Abraham can give the Hebron to whoever he chooses to give the land to. His descendants have the right of ownership, I submit. I say so because once the issue of ownership is settled, the two-state solution is possible. Hebron is currently a city in the West Bank, which is claimed by Jews and Palestinians. Israel had occupied the West Bank on the basis that Abraham purchased that land. Palestinians claim the West Bank because they are Canaanites and the land belongs to them. In this podcast, it is demonstrated that the Canaanites were the original owners of there is no doubt in my mind they were the original owners of the land. However, Abraham purchased Hebron from the Canaanites. This passage, as far as I am concerned, made Abraham the rightful owner of Hebron. The conflict between Israel and Palestine is solvable if the matter of rightful land ownership is resolved. Abraham lived in Canaan. Abraham and Sarah gave birth to Isaac in Canaan. Isaac lived with his wife Rebekah in Canaan. Isaac and Rebekah had Jacob and Esau in Canaan. Jacob had all his children in Canaan. It was from Canaan that the 12 sons sold Joseph into slavery in Mizraim, which is Egypt. And I say that the Israelites at some point migrated to Egypt from Canaan. So the benevolence of the sons of Ham to give shelter to the son of Shem must be celebrated, not condemned. It is about time that the children of Canaan and Shem unite.